Hey everyone, it's Scott from Scott's RPG Reviews. Welcome to my channel. Be sure to like and subscribe. Always got to say that. A little bit about my background and experience, and then what happened this weekend. So, I started doing RPGs in the mid 1970s, late 1970s through about 1989, and had actually left RPGing for the most part after 1989 in favor of board gaming, my job and career. I ran a business for a number of years, and also just got out of RPGs. I did LARPing for a while, about a decade. And then when Old Gods of Appalachia came out, I got really attracted back into running RPGs. With the group of friends that I have and the people that I know, doing campaigns is really tough. I'm finally getting one starting to run up, but the people just don't have time. And one of the things when I looked at Old Gods of Appalachia and the Cypher system, and the way its mechanics works is that you can run one-shots, you can teach rules really fast, and you can run adventures that are 3 to 4 hours long, which is perfect for most people, an evening of entertainment. And so I started planning this concept about last October and November, saying I want to try to run a series of one-shots. I said, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Hadn't gotten anywhere. And then finally this Saturday, at my local game store, Playmore Game Stores of Gaithersburg, Maryland, I ran Numenera, which is the precursor fantasy game that really where Cypher System came out of is that they built Numenera and said, oh, look, we can turn this into a generic system. The Cypher System was born. So Numenera is a sci-fantasy environment built on this Cypher System set of mechanics. Rather, Cypher System was built on it. I had 5 players sign up, or 6 players sign up. One was sick, brought me down to 5, and then one person just didn't appear for some reason. So I ended up with 4, which is actually not a bad size for a one-shot. So it was 4 players, and boy, was it a blast. People had a great time. We ran the very first adventure, Under the Pyramid, from Weird Discoveries, a Monte Cook game set of short adventures, and everybody had a blast. It took me about maybe an hour prep time to get ready for it, and I did probably did more than I needed to. I actually spent a lot of time printing up stuff and making some decisions, like I used poker chips for stat pools, which is really cool, and I built some maps and everything. A lot more than maybe you typically do, depending upon your type of play style. And people had a great time. By the time I was done, everybody was already asking, well, when's the next one? Other people at the store were saying, are you going to run some more? We're really interested. I had other people online asking if I'm interested. And so I'm starting to develop a schedule of running in-person one-shots and specializing in that particular one. I will run my one campaign, but I really want to run a bunch of one-shots. Now let's talk about running one-shots and running Cypher System in particular, because there's some things I learned which I hadn't really kind of rocked around. The first one is, I tell people when you're running one-shots in Cypher System, embrace the chaos. You're having to make, as a GM, a lot of decisions on the fly about monsters, levels, that kind of stuff. Difficulty levels you're constantly having to determine. So you've got to kind of embrace that chaos, and you substitute all that prep effort into making decisions there inside the runtime environment. I did find in Weird Discoveries, as I was reading through it when I was playing, it's like oh, look, here's a given scene, and it's missing some critical information which I need to fill in. It needed a backstory. When I was reading it about a half an hour before, I said, you know what, this really needs a backstory in a way to get the characters there, so I wrote a backstory about why they were coming. And I needed a couple other scenes I thought that would really flesh it out. So I took it and very quickly, in about a half an hour, fleshed in a couple more scenes and made it a really interesting adventure. And it took me about 15 or 20 minutes to explain mechanics. And Mr. Tarask says he can explain Cypher in 7. I say, no, really 15 to really get a good handle on it. And that explains the difficulty mechanic and the combat mechanic and then initiative, which I think are the important things you have to tell everybody. Those are the 3 key elements. I mean, initiative is a secondary thing, but I like to explain it because people like to know, well, am I going to go first, am I going to last? So I explain initiative as well. It's really easy to explain. And then we spent about 15 to 20 minutes handing out pre-gen characters and having people pick them and introduce each other. By the way, with one-shots, I definitely recommend pre-gens. And by the way, if you're writing a one-shot, put in pre-gens. The reason why I recommend pre-gens is that you now have more time to play and less time having people create characters, which we did a character creation for my campaign, and for 5 players, it took us about 2 hours to generate 5 characters, all tied together with cool stuff. But I would run, on a one-shot, I would run pre-gens, and the other thing is that you can create characters that have abilities, skills, ciphers, and maybe artifacts and other assets that fit the game you're running. So you don't end up with a character that says, oh, I have all this really cool stuff, and none of it applies. So there's a really good reason to having pre-gens inside your environment. I was looking at another adventure, doesn't have pre-gens. I was like, and it's a really specialized environment setting. I said, look, I do pre-gens to make sure that people had skills that were useful for that one. Otherwise, you might have bored players. I said, look, I didn't have any fun because I didn't have anything cool I could do. Now, let's talk a little bit about the cipher system, one-shots, and some things that are really, I think, cool about running one-shots in the cipher system. If you're not familiar with the cipher system, there are a couple of weird kind of mechanic issues that players have a hard time wrapping their heads around. The first one is you get XP as you go along, and XP can either be used to actually level up your character, or they can be spent in-game to do rerolls, to grab skills out of the air based upon narrative. They can be used in-game to do stuff. The problem is, and some other reviewers have talked about, but the problem is going up, it takes 16 points to tier up, basically level up in the cipher system. And with it only being 16 points, taking an XP and spending it for a reroll, they're not going to do that often, because that's a pretty big price to pay if you think about it for someone who's looking to level up their character. In a one-shot, people don't worry about leveling up. And by the way, particularly when you look at the mentality of the Numenera universe, which is survival today, without a look towards a future in a lot of cases. That's the way I view the universe. It's kind of interesting environment. They were burning XP all the time. They were saying, look, they said, look, I don't want to get hit by this creature. I don't want to miss his defense roll. And I actually had one guy, he had 4 XP. And so he rolled badly, he did one again, he rolled badly, and he spent 4 XP to get a reroll so he didn't die. So, or not die, but get really badly wounded. So that whole idea of spending XP on these in-game environments becomes a lot easier inside a one-shot, because you're not worried about tearing up and leveling up. The other thing is the cipher system. Everybody gets 2 techno-magic items in Numenera, but magical items that are single-use items. And by the way, magic-style characters typically get 3. It's very hard to get players to use those in a campaign, and they tend to hoard them. Now, you can never hold more than 2, but they don't spend the ones they have because they're worried that they might need them later. And I tell players whenever we're talking about this, I said, look, these magical devices, these techno devices in Numenera's case, are going to flow like water. I, as a GM, will tell you, if you turn around and spend one, and you spend it in a good way, you're going to turn the corner and get some kind of different item as a substitute. So don't worry about spending these items. Even with those kind of assurances, GMs say, look, it's really hard to get people to use them. I'm like, look, in a one-shot, they don't care about their character after the end of the game, and so they can go ahead and burn these. And in this game, I added, in the pyramid, in the town, I put in a general store which had a few ciphers in it. So that a player says, you know what, I really don't like this cipher that I came with. I want to turn this in and sell it back to you. You get it for a certain number of shins. They pay you, and then you could turn around and spend shins and buy other items as well. Other ciphers as well. So I created a kind of a cipher trading post, which honestly, in any game I was going to run, if there was a town or some place where there would be like a general store type thing, I would put in a cipher trading post kind of thing where, oh, you don't like that cipher? Here's 3 more, pick one, and then you negotiate a trade. And that can be interesting. That's an interesting interaction itself in terms of the game. So, cipher system and one-shots. Boy, did I have a blast. I had forgotten how much I used to love running RPGs. And my calendar is already starting to fill up over the next couple of months. I think I want to run some more Numenera. I'm going to run an Old Gods of Appalachia one-shot. I'm running an Old Gods of Appalachia campaign. There's some interest in me running The Strange, which is really going to be fun. And I've also turned around an Underground Oracle. I will make a quick pitch for them. Release the series of Cypher shorts. I just printed out their 3 fantasy shorts, so it's 9 shorts. And I'm going to start running one of those for people that want a more traditional fantasy setting. So, had a blast, had a great time, and it looks like I'm going to be running a lot of RPGs in the future. And by the way, before you ask, I only GM right now in person. I'm not running online yet. I have not learned virtual tabletop yet. I will eventually. Everyone have a good day wherever you're at.